Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your cattle market summary for the week ending January the 18th, brought to you entirely by DV Auction. And here to remind you guys, if you have a production sale coming up this spring and you haven't got it booked with us yet, you need to go ahead and do so. If you need to get video work done, let us know and we'll get that scheduled in too. But I tell you what, the schedule's getting really crowded for February, March, and April, but we've got a lot of reps all over the country, and if you guys want to get your production sale on there where you can broadcast it on the internet, have us take bids for you, we've got a big log of registered buyers that you can trust, and it'll just open up your production sale to a lot bigger buyer base that you might have never even thought you could tap into. But let's look at the markets for last week, which was just a steady disappointment. Been a lot of disappointments here over the last several weeks. The weather, the lot conditions have been horrible. The board has not really helped out, even though it has been higher here of late. It's just kind of caused everybody to have a lot of margin calls on everything that they hedged if they took a full position and hedged those cattle, and then the cash market does not follow suit. But last week we just knew we were going to have a higher market. All the signs pointed in that direction. We had big storms over the weekend last week to start the week. Then we had another storm coming which came in this past weekend, and we'd had a lot of cold weather. We'd had a lot of poor lot conditions that was sucking the weight off these cattle, hurting the yield on the cattle, taking a lot of pounds of red meat away from the market and off your supply chain. And we just knew with all that tonnage being gone that we'd be able to tap into a higher fat cattle market. It didn't end up being that way. The packers waited until late on Friday, and then we just had a lot of people cave in at steady money, and we won't know till they get the reports out on Monday here exactly how many sold, but enough to be significant. But still got them behind the barrel. They still going to need cattle. We've still had a lot of tonnage off the market, and at some point got to take advantage of the way things are and gain some market position. Let's look at the board for last week on your February live cattle futures. Monday was up 45 cents. Tuesday up $1.52. Wednesday up 87. You see why everybody was thinking that we were going to have a higher fat cattle market, including me. Thursday backed off 72 cents, and Friday down 57, with February live cattle contracts ending the week at 126.52, which was up $1.55 compared to the end of the previous week. Your April live cattle contract was up $1 for the week at 127.37, and it's now just over $10 from April going down to June, which is a big jump off there. January feeder cattle contracts, now they were hit hard. As much as the market helped, well, it didn't actually help it on the cash market, but as much as we thought that the poor weather and the storms was going to help your fat cattle market, it was just a downer for your feeder cattle, as nobody wanted them. And a lot of your feedlots, just the conditions were so muddy and terrible that they just couldn't take any cattle, period. And it closed up a lot of holes, and the board knew that, and your cash found that out, and it was just a downer for feeder cattle all week long. So January feeder cattle, Monday was down $1.27, Tuesday down a dime, Wednesday down 97 cents, Thursday down $2.35, and then Friday up 2 cents, with January feeder cattle ending the week at 141.45, down $4.67 for the week. March was down just over $2 at 142.82. Like I said, your fat cattle trade, just what a bust. Had them lined up, had the leverage, had everything. The packers needed cattle. They knew that a lot of tonnage had been lost through the storms, just loss of energy there, dealing with the mud and all these things, and just was not able to take advantage of it at all. Even the northern plains had sold higher earlier in the week on a few little deals, and early on Friday, and still your southern plains and the rest of your Nebraska and northern lots were unable to take advantage of it. But we'd seen a little dribble of 125 and 198. That would have been a buck higher, both live and dressed. We were not able to take advantage of it, and the overwhelming majority of the sales were on live basis were at 124, which was steady, and 197, which was steady. On a week where the board gained quite a bit of ground, everything was lined up for your fat cattle market to be higher, and it was just another victory by the packers. Box beef cutout values. Your average trade for the week was not off too bad. On choice cuts, $212.36 down $1.34 compared to the average of the previous week. And select cuts, your average trade for the week was $207.07, off just 13 cents from the average of the previous week. Choice select spread $5.29 through the week, but a good movement of 677 loads, cuts, trimmings, and grinds. Your slaughter, fairly decent, 620,000 head. That was just 6,000 head off of a big week the previous week, but 7,000 more than the same week a year ago, and we had a big year last year. So anytime we can show that, we're ginning along pretty darn good. But the winter storms, a lot of places said they had the worst lot conditions that they've ever remember having, or just as bad as they ever have. It was tough for a lot of your independent feedlots, but your large-scale independent lots. Of course, your corporate lots weren't loving it either, but it's your large independent lots were really taking the brunt of it, losing a lot of equity, and just margin calls on the cattle that they hedged and took a full position on. That hurt, especially with your cost of gains rising so much due to the wintry weather conditions, your poor lots, and also biggest reason probably is because of the lack of DDGs coming out the back end of these ethanol plants, because the fuel has gotten so cheap. They've just really turned these ethanol plants down to nearly nothing and closed a lot of them. So all those byproducts that especially in the northern plains, that a lot of these feeders have been using to keep their cost of gains down are just not available, or the price is sky high and higher than what your grain is, and so they've had to stop using them. But a lot of them are using them even though it is higher than what they could feed otherwise. But just a really tough kind of a week out there, and miserable out there. You're just not enjoying what they do, even though most everybody does love what they do on a typical week. But when everything is muddy and nasty and cold and miserable, and you're losing money and you're not able to take advantage of even the positives, it's not a good deal. Your feeder cattle markets had a fairly active week there, starting to wind down a little bit from the big rush we had right there at the first of the year, but we had a lot of stock show specials in and around Colorado, Nebraska, around the Denver area, because the National Western going on, and that is such a big deal for the beef industry, and a lot of your breeders out there with production sales showing their purebred stock, and draws in a lot of attention, and even as far away as going into towards central Nebraska and up into Wyoming, where we're trying to draw a little attention from the National Western Stock Show and having stock show specials. But your real-time index on Cattle Market Central, based on the 800-pound steer 7-day moving average, just like the CME's cash feeder cattle index, ended the week at 140.38, which was down $3.30 compared to the end of the previous week. So big loss in the cash market on your feeder cattle. Your CME index, the last available was for Thursday. It was at 140.205, and it's got a lot of ground to lose here on those Friday sales to catch up. And if you want an idea of what things are going to look like whenever the trading month gets up there, whether the information that they're using for the CME cash feeder cattle index, when it includes your fleshy cattle, your full cattle, a lot of your flagged cattle that they had the big comment period and they ended up deciding to use it to get more volume into that. If you wanted an idea what that's going to look like, it's going to look a whole lot like your real-time index, because there's no flagged cattle or even downgraded cattle in there. It's all the cattle. All those cattle are feeder cattle, and they will get fed one way or the other. But your cash feeder market in your sales last week ended up for feeder steers $3 to $8 lower. They took the brunt of the loss, because in the previous weeks when guys came right back from the holiday break, that's what they pushed the hardest on, and kind of had the feeder steer price overinflated. And then when they got stocked up and then the bad weather came and the lot conditions deteriorated, then that was the first thing that really dropped off hard. So what people normally want the most was the hardest on, but 3 to 8 lower on feeder steers. Feeder heifers $2 to $5 lower. Still a lot of demand for calves, especially your 4 and 5 weight calves, as guys are buying in full swing, buying grass cattle already. But even those, you've got to put them somewhere, and it's just muddy about everywhere you go, except for down here in the Texas Panhandle, and it's drier than a bone. But your calf price is steady to $5 lower for the most part. You look at some late week sales, Pays, public auction yards in Billings, Montana, having some Friday feeder specials there, going to go to every other week now. But Pays report there on Cattle Market Central, you see on your steers, your 5-weight steers, there were 559 head of them. They averaged 552 at 174.51 on the average of all of them. Your 6-weight steers, 450 head of those, averaged 647 at 158.03. Heifers, 5-weight heifers, 413 of them, averaged 542 at 151.82. And almost 400 head of 6-weight heifers, averaged 636 at 139.95. You go to, that was way up north in Montana. You go way down south on the border there, where we're trying to get that wall built. Been to Santa Teresa at the cattle crossing there. They've got a nice big tall wall right there, and you don't see any troubles. But there's a lot of places along that border that we need to get Trump the funding to get that built, and it's very, very important. It's got our government shut down. We may not have a cattle on feed report this coming Friday. We won't have one if they don't get the government open back up. We have been having regular market reports because they did deem them necessary, which previously on previous shutdowns they were not. But get along pretty good getting the market reported, but we may not have some of those NASH reports, or we won't have those NASH reports. But I told you what the market was in Billings, Montana. Now Santa Teresa, New Mexico, on imported Mexican cattle. On Saturday they had a sale there. Included in that on Cattle Market Central there, you see this one lot, 110 head of 445-pound steers, bring 177 at Santa Teresa Livestock Auction. Go back up where they get a premium in Crawford, Nebraska, at the Crawford Livestock Market. 120 head of 716-pound feeder calves bring $157. That's a look at your week's markets from a home DV auction office here in Canyon, Texas. We'll talk to you next week.